In June of this year, we put out a recruitment profile and advertised for the position through September. Since September, we've been vetting the applicants. It's involved a number of different steps that have led us here tonight, and I'm very pleased to have our 3 finalist candidates in front of you. I'm also very excited that you're going to have the chance to interact with each of the 3 candidates tonight and ask the questions that are on your mind and express what you hope to find in the next Iowa City Police Chief. We're going to start the evening with brief introductions. I'm going to ask each of the candidates to come up and spend about 3 minutes telling you a little bit about their background. And then we're going to break up into different corners of the room. You can see the candidates' names on tables. And at that point, you'll have an opportunity to interact with each of them, again, and ask the questions that are important to you. If you did not, on your way in, get a feedback form, they are in the back. We have Tracy and Karen with our Human Resources Department here to assist you in making sure that you know how to provide feedback to the city. We have a simple survey form. You can fill this out tonight and leave it in the back. You can also take it home with you, work on it in the next several days, and bring that back to City Hall. There's also email and a fax number on that form. And then there's also, if you prefer to do it online, you can pick up one of these quarter sheets of paper, and there's a web address there where you can leave feedback as well. I encourage you to do so. We are asking that you have your comments to us by Thursday, November 17th, by the end of the business day, 5 o'clock. Before I turn it over and let the candidates introduce themselves, I want to let you know that I will also be available tonight if you have questions about the process and what the next steps are and how you can further become engaged in this process. I'll kind of be back with the feedback table there and be happy to talk to any of you about the process. So with that, we're going to get started, and our first candidate before you tonight is Rich Austin.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to say it's very good to see so many people that are very interested in this process. I think all of the candidates want the best fit for Iowa City, and it's great to see the citizenry get involved. So that is very encouraging to me. So a little bit about me. I'm currently a captain with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. We're an agency of about 2,300. We serve both the city of Charlotte and the surrounding county areas, so we're a combined city-county agency. I've been there since 1993. I've served in community policing, patrol, and a patrol lieutenant, watch commander as a captain, and I'm currently assigned to the Internal Affairs Division of our police department. And Charlotte's a very unique community, a very diverse community, and I see a lot of similarities between Iowa City and Charlotte and a lot of the challenges that we face and a lot of the just the current issues that need to be worked through with policing in the community. But again, it's very encouraging to see the community out wanting to be a part of that process. So thank you. I'd like to let you know more about my background as you come around, and I encourage you to do that, and I look forward to speaking to each of you individually. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Troy Kelsay.
Hi, my name is Troy Kelsay. I'm currently a captain with the Iowa City Police Department. Just really quickly, I came to the Iowa City area in 1980 when I came here to college. I did a year in college here, and I moved out and joined my family out in Colorado. They'd moved out to Boulder in the meantime. Boulder was a great community. To me, it was very much like Iowa City, not Iowa City like Boulder, but the other way around. I actually came back here because I had already fallen in love with the community, and it was a little farther away from my parents, in all honesty. Went through school, never wanted to be a police officer, but I worked for the athletic department and the Johnson County Sheriff's Office. I got to know them and decided this was something that I wanted to do. I would like to take a moment here. At school is where I met my wife. She is standing back in the back. If you wave, Danny. That is my wife, Danielle Kelsay. We live between Iowa City and Solon. We have twins. They're now 21. One of them goes to the University of Iowa and is part of this community. The other one is up at Iowa State. I did my first 5 years with the Coralville Police Department and moved over to the Iowa City Police Department, and I have never regretted that decision. I never intended to be a chief. I am not interested in pursuing a chief's job anyplace else. Coralville, for example, right now has the application process open for their chief of police. I am proud to work for the Iowa City Police Department. I love this community. I love this department. We have one of the best departments in the state. That's not to say that there aren't areas where we can improve, and we certainly shouldn't sit on our laurels and say, man, we're already good, we don't need to improve. Much like a professional athlete, we should be hypercritical of ourselves. Some of my friends in law enforcement across the state talk about how vocal of a community this is, and how, from their perception, that maybe it's anti-police community. I absolutely do not believe that. I like the input. I like that when we have open forums such as this, people turn out. It's with that dialogue and that self-reflection and with that community input that we can improve and get better. Again, I am going to retire as an Iowa City police officer, whether that be as a captain or a chief. This is what I know, this is what I love, and this is what I want to be part of. And I appreciate your support in whatever capacity that is. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Jody Matherly.
Good evening. My name is Jody Matherly. I'm the police chief in Altoona. You've probably read my resume. It's online. I've also got some copies here tonight, so I won't go into great detail about that, but you're certainly encouraged to take a look at my credentials. But generically, I will tell you this. I've been a police officer for 33 years, a leader, a supervisor for 21 years, and 14 of that as a police chief. I've got my master's degree, and I serve on many executive boards for both county, state, and national police executive organizations. So I have a great involvement as far as statewide and nationwide too, as far as latest trends and what works and what doesn't work for police departments, and it's very important to stay current. What my resume doesn't tell you is that I'm a self-starter. I like to step out front and take on the difficult tasks that a police chief has. In today's climate, it's no secret that it's the most highly scrutinized profession that there is out there today, and the police chief is the most visible piece of that puzzle. So because of that, we have to make sure that we're being collaborative with our community, and so I'm glad that you folks are here tonight. You set the pace, and you set the trends, and you set the expectations for what you want out of your police chief. And what works in Altoona, or what works in Grinnell, or what works in Iowa City are all different. And so those successes depend on you. So I'm encouraged that you're here tonight. I want to hear what you have to say, and don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. One of those questions will be, why do you want to come to Iowa City? And I'll just answer that up front so I don't have to repeat it 100 times. I was in Flint, Michigan as a police officer for 20 years, which is a city of about 150,000, 340 sworn officers. So double the population of Iowa City, but almost quadruple the manpower for sworn staff. And it was a violent city, it was a very tough city. But we had good relationships with the community. It was the birthplace of Foot Patrol, and so we were very good at what we did. So I've worked that arena. Then I went to Grinnell. I was police chief there for 9 years, and served a community with the liberal arts college, as you well know. And then I went to Altoona. I've been there for 5 years, which has 4.5 million visitors a year. So why am I leaving? I'm coming to Iowa City because it's a combination of every place I've worked. It's got the diversity of Flint. It's got the liberal arts setting with the university, but it's also got all the visitors coming in and day out. So I get to perfect my craft and do everything I do and have learned to do very well in one setting. So I'm excited about that. So with that, I appreciate you being here. And again, don't be afraid to ask those hard questions tonight. That's what we're here for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to all three of you. And again, for those of you that are just joining us, we are now going to move to more of an open house type of setting. Each of the candidates will be stationed at different points in the room, and you're free to go up to them and ask your individual questions, or if you are moving in small groups, that is fine. Again, there is opportunities for feedback at the back table. There are hard copies that you can fill out tonight or return by next Thursday to City Hall, or there's an online survey that you can access to leave your feedback. Again, if you have questions on the process going forward, I'll be in the back of the room. I'll be happy to talk with you. Thanks again for coming out, and we can move to your respective parts of the room. Thank you.
Certainly, that was where I learned that, and I have relationships with community members in that community even until today. We were able to go into that community and not police it in a manner where we were very enforcement heavy-handed. We went into that community to ask the community leaders, what can we do to help you?
So to protect and serve.
Yes, absolutely. A protect and serve role. We brought in other city services, and we were able to reduce the quality of life and the aesthetics of the neighborhood through increased city services, and been able to take that model of policing, and we filter that through other areas of the city.
We're looking for a new model.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And community engagement is certainly a huge priority for me, especially portions of the community that may feel disenfranchised. I think it's important for the police chief to reach out to those communities and ensure that we are serving everyone in Iowa City and equally and fairly.
Thank you.
What kind of community involvement have you personally involved with over your career as far as outreach with the community, and what you do as far as your network? What do you think? As far as
Fortunately for Charlotte, I was on a team that led our department from traditional policing to community policing. I was one of the first community police officers in Charlotte. I was assigned a very challenged community just outside the inner city. So I worked there for 6 years as their community police officer. Whenever I was promoted to the ranks, I encouraged my officers to get out to community meetings, not just the community police officers, but even the patrol officers, to get more engaged with the community. As a lieutenant, my job was to be the face of the neighborhoods that I served. So I was at every community meeting without fail. I have my cell phone 24 hours a day. My community, whenever they needed to contact me, I had 6 community officers I work with that help me in that area. So that's been my involvement. Every step I've had in the police department, I found a way to stay engaged with the community. Of course, in internal affairs, it's a different type of engagement, but I ensure that we do very thorough, fair investigations to ensure that we maintain the rules and have accountability. Outside activities where I stay engaged with the community is there in my old neighborhood where I used to be a community police officer. There's a brand new daycare. It's a non-profit where most of the kids attend free of charge, and they're having some issues getting off the ground. So I've been working with some community partners, trying to help them get some playground equipment set up for them. And I've talked about I have some music degrees, 2 music degrees. So, yeah, so I've offered to come over and do some music classes for them. I'm a choir director for a church, so I stay engaged that way. And I find that music's a really good way to bridge the gap in communities, to be able to go out and talk about something besides the police work, and of course have some good conversations too. But I think that bridges that additional gap a lot. So I think that's serving me well, being able to make some inroads into the community.
Ask a kindred question to that. Sure. Because it has been shown statistically that a disproportionate number of black people are stopped for traffic things after search,
Right.
And also, I belong to the ACLU, and the ACLU has pointed out that Iowa and Iowa City is absolutely the worst, number 1 in the country for imprisoning black people for marijuana. And so I guess I'd like to ask the question that if the city council could be brought to pass legislation that there be a citation for marijuana and a small fine rather than a trip to the jail, how would you feel about that? Would you tell your officers to preferentially arrest people under the city statute, or would you insist on the state draconian one where it's to the focus?
Sure. No, I understand that, and we've looked at this across the country. Several of my colleagues across the country have looked at these issues, and for minor offenses in general, is it really a good way to use our resources to clog up the criminal justice system with relatively minor offenses? So that in general, that question in general means a lot to me. My goal is to have the police department do what they can to ensure that we have a very efficient criminal justice system. And if that's part of it, we can handle some things with citations, small fines, and get the citizens served well, provided there aren't other crimes involved, of a more serious nature. Certainly willing to have some conversations about that. Absolutely.
Well, that's a good thing, because this community managed to pull it together to deny bond issues for building a new jail 3 times because of marijuana policing, putting too many people in jail. And now, and too many people who are intoxicated. So now in mental health people, and this has pressured the supervisors to create mental health diversion and that sort of thing, which has helped a lot. It's brought down the jail population, but the marijuana continues to be a threat.
Sure. And certainly willing to have some conversations about that. And
it's very frustrating because all across the country it's being minimized in other states. And
Yes, and we've taken some steps with that in Charlotte as well to reduce some of those jail trips for those types of offenses. Typically, in my experience, if there are other things involved, such as weapons, that's a different dynamic.
Well, then it's completely different.
But yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I hear where you're coming from.
All right, so I'm Doug Vance. I'm a security manager at University Hospital. I work very closely with the police department, always have, former police officer. And so one of the things that we interact with the police a lot of time are these mental health patients coming into the hospital.
Right.
And so I'm kind of curious what dynamics, we obviously have mental health patients that we're dealing with every day.
Sure.
In Charlotte, I was out there before the riots. And so how is the police department encountering those folks, and what are they doing? Other than, what we see is you drop them off and you leave.
Right.
And those people that were causing problems in the community have now just been dumped into the middle of a hospital.
Right.
So what's the solution for that in Charlotte?
Solution to that in Charlotte is we are very involved in CIT training, crisis intervention training. Are you aware of that training?
Sure.
Yes. We are getting all of our officers trained in crisis intervention. I myself have been through crisis intervention training, and I'm a crisis intervention training instructor. So that helps me get the word out to our police department about how we handle those situations. Something I'm looking at with that too is when we get into those situations, sometimes they escalate quickly. For instance, a weapon may be introduced or something like that. And I've just looked at a police executive research forum study that talks about how we can even improve on CIT by bringing in some communication tactics as well as some other police tactics to try to contain these situations before they get heightened to a level where they may turn violent.
But I guess I'm guessing is what are you doing once they get to the hospital?
Right. A piece of that now is we're trying to connect mental health services throughout the city and county together, so that whenever we drop that person off, that they will have some type of relationship built with their service providers to be able to find services that they need. A lot of times it's medication. There's a program now, it's a mobile crisis where they can actually have home visits to ensure that their medications are provided for and there are no other issues that are obstacles to their mental health. So I think the partnerships with those types of service providers with the police department is very key, so that we're not, as you said, just dropping them off and then we're leaving. That's a difficult problem across the country, but I think tying service providers together, and of course I view the police as a service provider as well, and that loop of the mental health group certainly be interested in collaborations with that.
Thank you very much.
Sure thing. Nice to meet you.
Iowa City has it's now called CPRB, Citizen Police Review Board.
Yes.
Did you have one of those out in North Carolina?
We do.
Okay, so they have I served 7 years, just got off July 1st here in Iowa City. I really feel it don't have no teeth here in Iowa City. I mean, we take complaints, but we really can't do much about them. And it's just something as far as in the policies that I think needs to be changed. Could you just speak a little bit on that? Because we have no teeth here in Iowa City.
Well, we went through some of those same feelings in Charlotte, and we found some weaknesses in the system, the way it was. For one, the board didn't have subpoena power. Neither side had subpoena power, so I'm not sure how you did it here, but we would actually take the internal affairs investigation. We would do a pre-hearing and have an internal affairs investigator come in and talk about just the parameters of the investigation and take questions from the board. And if they were not satisfied with that, then they would call for a full hearing. The board's attorney would show up, and it was a more formal proceeding. But more often than not, the board sided with the police department with no recommendation power. It was either yes or no. So I think a lot of the board members maybe, and this is just my perception, felt somewhat constricted in their ability to give the chief feedback. They would see clearly the person maybe more than policy, but they may not necessarily agree with the policy, but that wasn't a part of the process. I think policy feedback has to be a part of that process. You could say, well, chief, maybe your officer was in policy. We don't like the policy. Here's the feedback we have. I think expanding that in that way would go a long way towards bridging that gap. But I do understand that. I think offering a little bit more legal power is going to help us. We're in that process now. And I think it helps both sides too, because as internal affairs, we can't subpoena anyone either.
Right.
So they may or may not show up. There's no legal requirement for witnesses to show up, and that I think making a more formalized process will be very helpful. We've done expanded training with the members on the board, which has been helpful as well. So I do think there are some steps that we could take to make that something that helps the public trust, and that was the reason it was implemented to begin with. But I think it reversed once the teeth, as you said, was taken out. It made it a point of contention, and that's certainly not what we want. So we're looking at revamping that now, and certainly be willing to look at what's going on.
So say if there was a community effort to give teeth to our police review board, you would be supportive of that?
Yeah, I would want to be a part of that process, absolutely.
So your current position with Internal Affairs, how long have you been doing that now?
Well, previously I was an Internal Affairs investigator for 5 years. Been in the command role just over a year now. Right at a year.
So what's your philosophy then on the discipline with regards to the officers and also including supervisors?
Well,
you've had a chance to do some work, some investigating on supervisory misconduct.
Yes, all the way up through the executive level. Yes, I have. And we have those investigations occasionally. Some of them find wrongdoing, some of them don't. But we do not exclude our command officers from any of the process. So that's the simple question. As far as our discipline philosophy, we have a sort of a unique discipline philosophy. It's been modeled in other areas across the country, and it's actually been in a couple of textbooks, but it was an idea of our former Chief Gerald Stevens, who believes that we should look at every situation as a case by case. Any situation can be anything from found not sustained all the way up through termination. We look at through whether it was an error or not, where that error was intentional or non-intentional. We look at the degree of harm to the community, to the degree of harm in the police department, the officer's past record, and their experience level. And then, just as in a more legal or formalized proceeding, we're able to view it through the lens of our discipline philosophy, and then render better decisions. Now, part of what I do in internal affairs is I'm not a voting member. We have independent boards that do that depending on the situation. It's a pretty formalized process. But I ensure the consistency. Because if I hear a hearing one week where an officer did something similar to the one we're hearing, this officer got a written reprimand and this one's getting 40 hours, I say, well, let's talk about that a little bit. Right. Here's what's been consistent. That ensures consistency of discipline throughout the police department. So, some things we've been able to do successfully.
Somewhat random question. The Intercept recently came out with a series, investigative series on the Chicago Police Department with two officers who were trying for a long time to come forward, trying to report corruption basically within the police department, and they were stonewalled throughout. And did you happen to read that story at all?
No, that's not one I'm familiar with. One thing I can say that, especially with a police department the size of Iowa City, as a police chief, certainly I want officers to work through their chain of command as much as possible, but I'm always accessible. If officers need to talk to me about an issue, then I'm always available.
What about policing in the schools? What goes on in Charlotte with that kind of?
We do have school resource officers. I understand that that's been a point of contention within the community. Yes. Yes, and I can see the community's point of view, but I've also been on the side where that's just where the way that I kind of grew up in policing with officers in the schools. I would be interested in getting in some of those conversations about that and showing the community some value in that. I've seen it work. I've seen it work well, but I'm also of the opinion certainly everything that works in Charlotte will not necessarily work in Iowa City.
We're talking about two different regional areas.
Right. Yes. I'm not trying to rubber stamp anything, but I just want to make sure that all facets of that have been explored. And to make a change like that, something I do a lot is pilot a program and see if I can just get some buy-in and then let the community see how it is and then make a more informed decision after that.
Thank you.
Sure.
It shouldn't have happened. The police department's better for it. I believe the community is safer for it now. I also believe the way things would be handled today are different. I did my time as a public information officer. You will not find, in my personal biased opinion, you will not find a police officer anywhere, or police command staff anywhere that is more transparent or more willing to talk about things than I am because of that. I think that it was wrong. I think there was absolutely nothing wrong with saying we screwed up royally. We made a mistake that cost one man his life and changed other lives forever. Saying that doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change the facts of what happened. It doesn't change that there's going to be a civil suit and a settlement later. It doesn't change any of that. Saying no comment, all that does is create a vacuum that people get wild speculation.
And then they don't trust you.
Correct. And so I think that has changed. I think that there were positive outcomes from that, both in change of policies. I do think the community is safer. I think that not just because of that, but in part because of that, the way that law enforcement deals with the community and the media has changed. When I did my time as the public information officer 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I wasn't sure. Police officers kind of think as the media and defense attorneys as on the other side of the fence. I see Lee Hermiston here. He was with the Press Citizen at the time, but I developed very good relationships with the media, and I could trust them. I mean, if I screwed up, the police department, if the police department screwed up, you should admit you screwed up. We could have done this better. Or even if it's, we were within policy, but in retrospect, we need to change the way we do business on, pick your instance, the rec center instance. As far as allocation to resources and community involvement, it takes away from my ability to patrol when I have officers that I'm dedicating to go do community relations building events or to participate in neighborhood programs. I still think that pays dividends to the community because I think that's in part why when the shooting happened out by Mercer Park, people called in. There were those positive relationships. I think that we can strengthen those. It's a balancing act. When I entered law enforcement 30 years ago, if you'd have told me as an officer then all the things that we do now and said this is what police officers will do, a lot of what we do now is non-traditional policing, and it gets more non-traditional all the time. Again, it should not be about enforcement. It should not be about driving around patrol cars, just catching burglars. It should be about what are you doing in between those calls for service, and how are you gaining that trust of the community. There are going to be times, oftentimes, that you and I are going to talk, and we're going to leave, and I'm going to say, you know what? we're going to have to disagree on this one, or I respect your opinion. You're entitled to it, but I don't share it. That's okay, as long as you're comfortable coming into my office or coming up and talking to me. You should. That's what needs to happen. You need to be comfortable calling the police. You need to be comfortable whether it's a police shooting or a garage burglary. When the police show up, as a neighbor from across the street who saw something, to come out and say, "Here's what I saw," as opposed to, "I don't want to get involved because the police won't be here when I called, or last time they were here, they didn't care what I said."
Yeah, you got a ticket for a taillight.
I'm just, and the Shaw thing did influence me on that.
Well, I mean, that's a legacy that you would inherit as the chief, and I would be disingenuous of you not to just go ahead and throw it out there, because I think that there are a lot of people in my generation who lived through that with you, that we will carry that, and so an incumbent coming up through the ranks and taking the position of the police chief is going to have to be willing and able to talk about it.
And I'm told, actually, by people that I talk about it too much. That's some of the feedback I get, and it's hard for me not to talk about it because it shapes so much of what I am and how I interact with people now, and the willingness to engage in dialogue or be as open and transparent as I can be. I don't know if you read in the materials Jody talked about. He had his, I didn't print any of mine off, but one of the things I address when I'm answering the questions is how that was really an epiphany for me, and that changed. I struggled with things after that, and that changed. It reinforced some of the things I already done, and it changed others. And I mean, it should not have happened. I would still do anything to make it go away, but I have to grow from it, or it was a waste. Again, I think the police department grew from it. I think the community's safer, and personally, I think I'm a better person for it. I struggle with it still. If you were in some of the interviews when I talked about it, my voice gets cracky talking about it. It didn't tonight. Today I am actually just getting kind of passionate about it. I'm sorry, but it was a waste, and it was handled poorly in my estimation. And I will be generous to the people who handled it and say that's the way business was done back then. It shouldn't have been, and it is changed.
So there was a black athlete who was...
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
There was a black athlete who was playing Pokemon Go in a park, and there were 4 cops who drew guns on him, even though he didn't have guns on him. It seemed like it could have easily been another shooting accident, with unjustified use of weapons.
It would have been unjustified had there been a shooting. In that particular case, there was an armed robbery of a bank, one of several armed robberies of a bank with the same MO, with the same description of the suspect. In this particular case, the description that went out was a black male, talked about something covering his head.
Could I just return to the disproportionality again, right? Can you just describe fairly briefly how you want to handle the disproportionality in black or white arrest, not traffic stops, not use citations?
And when you say arrest, and I struggle with...
That's in the 2015, I think.
Okay. You're talking about a specific stat. That's good, because I think that's the first thing that needs to happen, is make sure that everybody's talking about the same thing. I think that it's more than a police department issue. I think that we need to, first of all, analyze or understand what we're dealing with. The police department, I think, is one link in the chain, Charlie. If the community, and I'll cite an example, if name your hardware store, convenience store, if a group of high school age white males comes in and is caught stealing something, and they're dealt with a different way than a similar group of young black males that come in, that's on the store. Does the officer have much discretion if that store or that business owner calls and says, I insist that this young black man get charged, and we never get called about the young white man who did the same thing? I think that police should be able to offer options to that business owner, but in the end, that business owner is the victim in that particular case. And I'm not going to say to you, I think that maybe you've got some prejudice showing up because you're calling whenever a black man steals something, but you're not calling a white man steals something. So I need to understand better where the numbers come from. I think that some of it comes from the, were you here when I was talking about status violations on stops? Traffic stops. Okay, so status violations on traffic stops where basically I'm casting a wide net and just seeing what I catch. You're going to, I believe, get disproportionate number of minority contacts and arrests, whether it be, again, status offenses, driving while suspended or failure to pay a fine, so a failure to appear ticket. And it has less to do with somebody being black or Hispanic and more to do with, I didn't have the money to pay that fine, so because of that I now have a warrant out for my arrest. So if what I'm doing, if what my officers are doing are just sitting in an intersection somewhere and running license plates, and I don't think they should, I think there are other ways that they can, that officers can, if they're having downtime and are able to run traffic, then have them run traffic towards public safety related issues, whether that be speed or drunk driving, things like that. And I personally, I think that will lower some of, I think that will get rid of some of those arrests that are for failure to appear and things like that. The officers balk a little bit at that because they're like, okay, well I ran him and I know that he has a warrant for arrest, or I know that he's not valid, I need to address it. Well, I don't disagree with you, you do need to address it, but if in that same time that you'd spent at that particular intersection running license plates all day long, you'd been out stopping people for observable driving issues, and you took a drunk driver or two off the road, which is making the community safer. You're arresting a drunk driver, or you're arresting somebody for driving while suspended. So
are you going to be willing, just ask you straight out, as police chief, are you going to be willing to direct your officers to get off the status stuff and get on to safety?
Yes, that's already happening to some degree. Lieutenant Denise Brotherton on the 3 to 11 watch, she came to me and she talked about some of these issues and she said, I would like to try this. I said, go ahead. And I can share those directives with you. I believe I'll have to take them out. But she directed her officers that, you know what, I don't want you just to be running random status violations. I'm not telling you you can't do it at all, but you should have an articulable reason why you're running it. Not just I'm fishing. And if you want to go out and fish, then go out and do public safety traffic enforcement. I have not made that department-wide for a couple reasons. One, I want to see what happens with her watch. Two, as interim chief or captain's operations, I don't want to start the department one direction just to have Jody or Rich come in and say, I want to go over here instead. But I think that Lieutenant Brotherton brings up a valid point, and she got it from, and I've seen there are other agencies that are trying that other places too, and public safety, traffic enforcement, whether it's speed, I mean those type of things, tend to have a lower, a more reflective, proportionate. Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. More proportionate. So that's what she's trying to say. I'm not telling you not to go do traffic enforcement. Matter of fact, I'd like to see you go do more traffic enforcement, but do something that is more directly public safety related.
Send those officers out to Foster Road, which I drive on all day. I've had a couple of people pass me when I'm driving 25. So, but
and one of the big, I mean, if I'm looking at the neighborhood complaints that come in on like the ICPD, the complaints are about people speeding down their streets, people passing, like you're saying, passing, or you know, they are those type of officers can do that 8 hours a day if they have time. They don't, but I mean, if they wanted to, they could do that, as opposed to sitting in a particular intersection and running every car that comes through. Especially if you're sitting in a part of town that, again, you sit there because the fishing's good. It's been a good fishing hole, but it's good not because it's good because you have people who can't afford to, you know, or they're driving a 10-year-old car instead of a 10-month-old car and a tail light's out. And if you have no tail lights on and it's nighttime, that's one thing. That's a public safety issue. But
so I understand status versus safety, traffic control, or traffic enforcement. are there ways to get at similar issues on other kinds of arrests that are going on?
I would hope so. I'm not sure. I mean, we've had some of those discussions as far as what are they and what I'm willing to try just about anything. The big thing is,
are you looking for community support for trying things?
Or even community ideas. Again, I'm sorry, Charlie, I don't remember when you walked up, but I don't have to agree with it, but if I don't have a better solution, if I'm not trying something else, if it doesn't compromise something that I'm doing, and if it doesn't compromise public safety, much like I'm allowing Lieutenant Brotherton to try this on her watch, why wouldn't I give it a shot and then assess it? You know, it's having the intended consequence, or it really isn't, or the perception is that, because it really is community driven. In the end, it should be about public safety, and it should be, I will echo something that Jody said, you know, what works in Grinnell or what works in Altoona and what works in Iowa City may be vastly different. So why wouldn't I try it here? Because maybe it will work. Or maybe my community isn't supportive of that where it would be supportive of that in Grinnell, or vice versa. This goes back really to communication with the community. Is you believe in what you do, and I see you at the table in many, many different things. But just because you sit on one side of the table to me and I sit on the other side of the table doesn't mean it should be Charlie's opinion, police perspective. I mean, it should be community. I mean, and we should be collaborative, and we should be working towards community solutions. So anyway.
And it's not a bad idea. We'll reduce the hit and runs, and you know, the field identifies it's let them operate. You know, it's easy to sit on the backside of this and say, you know, well, these are undocumented people, but these are your neighbors, and I guarantee you, and I had this happen in Grinnell, if they go to be moved away, you're going to be pretty torn up by that, because these are good folks that are here doing the right thing. So, I absolutely love Flint. I miss Flint. I ran into the police chief. Yeah, don't drink water. Yes, the police chief there was an old partner of mine, and I saw him at the ICPD conference. And he said he didn't come back. I said, no, I found my home in Iowa. But you know, I love that community. We had a good thing going there. So, yeah. But this diversity here is similar.
But Grinnell, while it's a college town, you may not have some of the same challenges that you face.
Sure.
How do you view the relationship with the police department?
Well, I'll tell you, we had University of Michigan Flint campus in Flint. It was literally 3 blocks from my police department. So I've dealt with the larger campuses in an urban setting, no different than this, smaller scale. Same with Grinnell, you know. It is so important. I'll give you a story. I got to Grinnell, and the consensus was that our police officers were going to loud party calls, and the students were throwing eggs at our police cars. They were running out the backs of houses. And so I tried to troubleshoot and figure out what was going on with that situation. And it turns out we were, you know, knocking on doors. Sometimes the officers would just enter the house, you know, there's minors in there drinking, and it was just chaos. There was a lack of respect on the student side and a lack of courtesy on the officer side. So I pulled everybody together, and including the student government, all the owners of those houses in Party Row that this was happening at, the dean of students, and we sat and we talked about how to handle it when we get a party call or a fight call or beer cans in the neighbor's lawn call. How should we handle that call? How should the students respond to that call? And it worked. Within a few months, we had that cleaned up. The kids weren't running out the back doors anymore. We resolved the problem. It's a loud music call. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Turn the music down, and we're gone. You know, and that worked well. There was a good understanding. We never had problems again in that area. So you need to build that trust. Just because those students cross the street doesn't mean that we should be any different than the university police. Let's be on the same page. Let's let them know that, you got to behave. But certainly we understand that students make mistakes, and let's, use a little bit of courtesy and patience when we're dealing with that.
Babysitting is part of the function of the college.
What's that?
Babysitting is part of the function of the college.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that they're not held accountable. So we also did another program for minors in possession. I was getting phone calls from folks that said, I sent my 4.0 student to the college, and you arrested him for underage drinking. Now he's got a criminal record. So I got with our county attorney and said, why don't we, when this happens, be it a public intox, as long as they're not fighting with the police or anything, but let's do a deferred prosecution where the county attorney has the authority to say, you take an alcohol education class, let's wipe that from your record. So that way the kids had a chance to bounce back and not leave with a criminal record. I was a college student. College students, we understand that. And so we try to leave that out for them to correct the situation.
I was an academic advisor, and I was advising pre-professional students, which included, not only medicine, but dentistry and the other health professions.
Sure.
And the competition to get into those fields is so dreadfully
yes.
That the least little thing can throw it out. And this business about arresting somebody for having alcohol underage or having marijuana when there's nothing else wrong was just, I just can't tell you how frustrating that was.
That's why you want to leave that out and be able to correct it.
Interacting with, especially in a university town where you are building people's attitudes. I mean, I have heard over the last few years, especially since the university and the city had a major crackdown on alcohol, they stopped college students from drinking, I guess, but anyway. It's the attitude that you build with students when they come away fearing the police.
Right.
And we all know the police don't solve crimes, witnesses do.
It's not the students that fears, it's everybody that fears this right now. We are in a pickle nationwide. We need to deal with that, and we've had some bad issues come up, we know that. And we can all name them. We need to, whether you're a student, whether you're, just an Iowa City resident, a person that's black, a person that's white, Hispanic, we need to make sure that we're treating everybody equally with respect and dignity, period. That's number one. But student-wise, referring to your question, you shouldn't have to worry about walking across the street off the university and being treated differently by the Iowa City Police Department than the University Police Department. We need to be on the same page. What I did in Grinnell, I went to all the student orientations. I introduced myself to them. I told them, here's our expectations when you're downtown. Know that my officers may come up and engage in conversation, but it's a friendly conversation. We're not looking to say, well, you smell like alcohol, let's PBT you out. Yep, you're 0.01% over the limit and everybody's going to jail. When parents called me and said, you arrested my student and they didn't do anything wrong other than alcohol in their breath, I'd give them a copy of the report. And generally, there was more there than just alcohol in the breath. So a lot of times it was a safety issue. A lot of times, the person was either, fighting or yelling or something was going on. There's usually another piece to that. But we need to make sure that we're choosing our battles. We need to make sure that we are keeping peace and tranquility, but also use some common sense and some patience when we're dealing with folks. At the end of the day, it's called procedural justice. You guys have probably heard that buzz term. And it's simply this. Treat that person with dignity and respect. If there's a negative connotation in a ticket or an arrest, at least they can say, I didn't appreciate that, but what a nice officer. They listen to me, they treat me with respect, and that's, we really have to have that at the very minimum.
What we really need in this town is an ordinance that makes a citation for marijuana rather than a criminal charge with a fine instead of a trip to the jail.
If you read
one of the problems is that we have a county attorney who insists that they have no discretion, that if they are charged with marijuana, she cannot drop the charge. It's got to go through. And this has resulted in Iowa and Iowa City having the highest number of people.
Second place right now, you're right.
which is just shameful.
Sure.
And so I'm wondering what your attitude would be toward that kind of an ordinance.
It's twofold. Your first problem is if we're arresting more blacks for marijuana, even though there's the studies have shown it's the same amount of usage between white and black.
Right.
If we're arresting more, we're stopping more, and that's a problem.
That's why because they stop them and find some little.
And that goes back to our disparity in policing and traffic stops issue that we're talking about. So let's not stop them for 2 miles an hour over, ask for consent, search the car, find the weed, and book them. If we're doing that for blacks, we should do it for whites. Certainly equal treatment if that's our... But it shouldn't be one of the tactics we use. But the first thing is to stop. The second thing is, and you saw the recent human rights and ACLU studies that said we were second in the nation for the number of blacks for arrests for weed.
Because we were first.
Yeah. So decriminalization of marijuana is one of the things you're talking about.
Yeah.
And they call it a civil infraction. So it may be a civil fine. You pay $75. Ann Arbor, Michigan's been doing that for 25 years. So, but it also takes a change in ordinance, maybe state law, to have discussions in that area.
We just forget it for state law. We're not with brain dead.
Right. No. But legislative action is one method to do that, to say, and I'll tell you, I don't even know which states. I've been so busy last week, but on election day, I think a few more states legalized marijuana.
Well, 4.
Yeah, they have.
Right. So you've got 3 already with Colorado and Washington.
We got 4 more.
It's coming. It's coming. And I tell the guys that you got this weed bust, but legalization's coming pretty soon. And I think that's the trend of America. So we need to
up the jail, clogs up, the justice system, and it makes everybody resentful.
I understand.
Well, for instance, one of my relatives is a commanding staff at Chicago PD, and it was 2 years ago. They basically were told, "Don't bother. We have bigger problems. If you see somebody smoking a joint on the street, don't bother."
That's what the Ann Arbor police said. I asked them about that. They said, "Are you kidding me? We don't have."
Right, and like I said, I think it was a $15 civil infraction, even back when I first started police work, and they were literally 30 minutes from Flint, so we were close by. So I don't know the exact answer here. It needs attention, especially if we're second in the nation, we need to do something, and that may be something that we need to take on at the legislative level, at the policing level. But it's hard to bring this young officer on and say, here's the laws of our society,
no,
and not do your job.
What I'm saying is that if there were a citation created in Iowa City,
it's an easy answer for us then.
You would.
Sure. Yeah, you cite a civil infraction.
Well, you know what? My son has been stopped. The first time he was stopped, he was in 6th grade with another friend coming out the library, and they accused him and his friend of making a disturbance in the library. Well, it wasn't them, it was somebody else. And my kid has been a volunteer at the library for years. But you know what? He tried to say, would you come in so I could show you or prove it to you? And he wouldn't do it. Last summer he was stopped, and they said that he had marijuana in his car. Well, he had just borrowed my car. And so I went there, and they had my baby on a curb, 4, not police cars, but like these black SWAT cars. And I get over there, and I'm like, what did he do? What happened?
Right.
And they said that the dog barked at my car. And that was a signal to them that marijuana was in the car. So I let them search the car. And this is what I said. I said, let the dog in, and he'll go straight to it. And they were like, no, we want to do it. So I let them search the car, and they searched the car, and they didn't find anything. So I found out later that one of the guys that he was with had been picked up 2 weeks ago. So I'm like, why bother my kid?
Right.
And he works downtown now, and he sees black kids that may be in a fight. They'll call the police. Did I say black or white? They'll have white kids in a fight, drinking, and they'll let them go home.
But if it's black kids in a fight, they will take them to the police. They have to spend the night in jail. If they're not from here, they go through a whole nother process. You know,
That's a problem. There's no doubt about that.
It's a real problem.
Here's where our supervisors and all the
and
officers.
then let me tell you this: the police officer, he made me mad because he came to me and he goes, "Your son is the most polite, respectful kid I ever met, but he totally, the way he was treated, I didn't like it at all."
Right.
So it is a problem here.
Sure.
It needs to be addressed.
It needs to be addressed.
The bit about the dog sniffing your car. Okay. If your son's friend had marijuana, or somebody, if at any time there was that in the car, a dog will sniff it even 6 months later. So that could be
But
why.
that was my car, and I know it wasn't marijuana in it. But listen, when I went to pick him up the next day, I was telling my story, and they said that it's a tactic that the police use. If they bark at the car, that gives them right to search the car.
Absolutely.
Well, that
I don't
know.
that's
the
what I
spirit
was
of the
told.
question is, correct me if I'm wrong, is if you're going to do it for the black driver, do it for the white driver. That's where the disparity's coming in, which is the whole crux of the conversation.
Let me tell you this: there was no marijuana. He is not a bad kid, and he's respectful. I happened to be at a shelter house gala, and the attorney general came to me and told me that his paperwork had went across her desk, and that it was something that wasn't right. So she investigated, and that's how I know that a guy that he was with, one of his friends, was in trouble. But I'm like, why would you go after my son and not the guy who actually did it?
And I encourage folks in a situation like that, make sure that you make that call to the police department and talk to the supervisor. The downside is people don't trust the police right now, and they're afraid to make that call. And I encourage you, make the call, let a supervisor look into it and make sure things were done according to the book. And if it wasn't done, then we take care of it.
We had been talking a little bit earlier about racial disparity in policing in Iowa City, and you mentioned that you were familiar with the St. Ambrose study and its findings with disparate policing in Iowa City, which did indicate that Iowa City does have that problem, perhaps a less serious problem than other places, but it exists. But one of the specific findings was that there were 2 officers in particular who were responsible for a vastly disproportionate number of inappropriately high ratio of stopping of black people versus white people. And my question to you is, as police chief, how would you handle those 2 specific officers? Obviously, we as the public don't know who they are. I assume someone does.
Well, my adage is always facts before acts. So I want to find out exactly why that occurred. And it's easy. You review their work, and we need to review that on a consistent basis. Why is that happening? If I move them over a square mile, is it still happening? So that's one question: is why is it happening? Maybe it was an assignment they were on. Maybe they have ill heart. I don't know. So, but whatever that problem is, we need to rectify that. And again, if they're just stopping people because they're black, that's a huge problem, and they won't be working here very long. Again, I call that a mistake of the heart. If you're stopping somebody because of the race, you're not going to stay in police work. It's not acceptable. If they're stopping them because of an assignment they're on, let's reevaluate the assignment. Again, we're not addressing crime by communities or communities of color. Let's deploy our resources on crime trends by the crime that we need to take care of. And I use this armed robberies that just happened here recently, where we had a male black subject going in 5 a.m. to McDonald's and all the stores and committing robberies.
My friend was working at one of those.
Thank you, and it's traumatic for that victim. But let's not sit out in front on Highway 6 and start stopping every black driver that comes by because we're trying to catch a robber. Let's get our reasonable cause, let's get our probable cause, and make sure that we're stopping based on crime trends and descriptions versus just persons of color. That's a huge problem. We have, my understanding, and from what I've seen, professionals in the Iowa City Police Department. I'm confident that they're doing good work. I'm confident that if they need to be trained, if policy needs to be tightened up, we can do that. So we will get there. It'll take time, but we can get there.
And so just to clarify, if you did find that it was in fact two specific officers who were deliberately targeting people of color because they're people of color, they would not be working for you very long?
That is an illegal stop. If they say, I'm stopping you because of your color, it's illegal and it's prohibitive and it just won't happen. It would be stopped immediately and the officers would not remain on the department. I don't know why he was stopped. I don't know why the dog was searching as he was. You know, certainly that's what drug dogs do. But usually you do that with reasonable suspicion and not just arbitrary stops. And the courts have been clear on that. You know, we're not stopping folks and holding them up for a dog search or a dog sniff and holding up their freedom to leave. Finish a job, finish a ticket, and you got to kick them loose unless you have a reason to hold them there. So the arbitrary, non-reasonable suspicion drug rounds with the dog would be highly unusual and not acceptable.
So to follow up specifically on that, so say that's the practice here right now, which, you know, I mean, I can only claim it, but I'm claiming that it is right now. They stop you, they hold you, and then canine unit arrives and they search your car.
That's
so
generally an unacceptable practice. Just
so
to stop you, hold you,
is a bad idea.
and well, that's a whole other issue. But stop and hold you and just have dogs rounding cars. Again, it's generally unacceptable.
So how will you hold police officers accountable who engage in those behaviors?
Well, first of all, is positive discipline, which is training. You know, if these folks are doing it wrong, if the officers are doing it wrong, and again, I don't know what's going on, but from what you're hypothetically telling me, they need to be trained and make sure that they're on the same page with court rulings, with the state of Iowa laws, and with our procedures. And so I'd have to review all that. But if arbitrary stops are being made, then that's an issue. Asset forfeiture?
Yeah, there you go. I'm all over this. I was about to say that.
Sure.
So don't you think that's basically a crime committed against the population by the government?
Here's where the government falls short. You know, the federal law and the state law says that you can take money for forfeiture if it's involved in illegal practice, generally that being drugs. But they have civil forfeiture, which says, well, if we think it's involved, then we'll go ahead and take it and let you prove later through attorneys that you should get it back. And that's where we're falling short. And so you're starting to see the courts rule in the favor of don't take it until you chase down the trail to see, and certainly don't keep it.
Iowa is one of the bigger offending states on that front.
Yeah.
And you're a police chief in Iowa, and now you're going to try and come here and be a police chief. What are you going to do in Iowa City when it comes to civil forfeiture?
Again, instead of just taking it because it looks odd, we need to make sure we chase it to the end and find out if it was in fact illegal funds from
reliably count on Iowa City not making it on the front of the ACLU website.
Preferably, absolutely. Anytime there's bad news for us, that's not good. And but those are the things that we need to look at. Is not just the civil forfeiture, but keep it in the criminal arena. If this person's arrested and we can, and funds are taken because of that, under the law, that's one thing. But to allow that to happen for the civil side, it creates the problem. My officers don't take it on the civil side. We just don't do it. We take it on the criminal side.
So you're in charge here. You're not going to do anything.
Well, I would look into it and find out what we're doing. It's hard to say, exactly what's going on, but I can tell you the way I do it now, and I would encourage my officers not to do it wrong because that's not a good idea, and that's how you make it on the websites.
So I have a question. You were talking about influence in the community, right? And different departments. Yes. And how Iowa City is separate. It's within the University of Iowa. Mm-hmm. The University of Iowa has a policy very strict on drinking, alcohol, drugs. This group here earlier was talking we should not really address the drugs. We should come up with a civil fine. We should do something different. That's not the University of Iowa's mission, right? Their judgment is just they need drugs off of campus. Mm-hmm. They don't want that exposure. You're saying you're just outside that boundary and you're willing to say that's okay. So now you're in conflict with the other local jurisdiction, the other police department. And in this community, you have Coralville Police, Iowa City Police, the Sheriff's Office, the University Police, University Heights Police,
right.
And they all have their own goals and missions. Mm-hmm. So your mission doesn't trump any of theirs.
Right.
So how do you really work that out where it is a common goal? Because right now, each community has their own goals.
Absolutely.
And you can't say my goals are more important.
Right. Again, let me be clear. I can't say that we should not arrest those folks if it's against the law and it's only criminalized right now. if the legislator, if the city codes, if everything lines up where it's a civil infraction, fine, and it's easier and quicker for our officers, the person's still held accountable via a fine, then that may be an acceptable practice. The downside is if Coralville doesn't, if it's not state law and it's local code, and Coralville doesn't fall into place with that, then there's a problem with inconsistency of enforcement. If you cross this street, conflict. Sure, absolutely. And we do that by state. If you cross the state into Illinois, your fines are different, your rules are different, your laws are different.
But
and
this community is much closer than across state
I understand.
Depends on which state. And I would throw in on this, the reason it should be different is because I pay his salary. I only pay a little bit of the university salaries. I don't pay any of the other salaries.
Unfortunately,
my tax dollars pays for this police department.
Sure, unless state law is the umbrella, then those laws can be different. You see with curfews, you might be able to stay up to 11 or stay out late till 11 in Coralville, but only 10 in Iowa City. I don't know what the curfew laws are, but you see the difference. So sometimes just by merely where you live, there are differences in laws, unfortunately. What's important is that we set out the rules so the kids know what the laws are in the areas that they're living and visiting. They're here for 4 years. We're talking college students. And you want them to have a successful college career
here.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to go to downtown Iowa City.
Right.
It's within your thing. At the same time, you could cross the street and you're on university property.
Well, it's more complicated than that. So,
sure it is.
Well, what I was going to say, so Iowa City Police right now gave jurisdiction to University of Iowa Police to police Iowa City streets and the other way around. So, I mean, if you are not a student and you're in downtown Iowa City, but you're not on university property, you could be stopped by U of I cop, and they could do, whatever the U of I police practices are.
Yes.
What's your stance on that?
We all have police authority in the state of Iowa. Generally, everybody takes care of their own area, but if your question is, could a University of Iowa stop on a city street and vice versa?
Well, I know right now they do. They have an agreement where they call.
Legally, they can. If their police chief says, "I don't want you stopping cars over there. Stop on campus only," then their patrolman should probably listen to their boss and do that. If they see something egregious, let's say it's a drunk driver and they're going to cause an accident, hurt somebody, they're probably encouraged to get that car stopped, call an Iowa City car, and get over and let's take care of that problem out of safety. But certainly,
so not something like open container,
right?
Public intox.
Certainly, I don't think we're expecting University of Iowa police to sit over Lynn Street in Iowa and necessarily, and that's probably the edge of campus. Let me, because it kind of goes in and out right here. But and sit there and conduct enforcement efforts. They're getting paid to take care of that college, and certainly that they, not that they can't help us, but their focus and their resources shouldn't be in the Iowa City streets itself. And I think you would find that the chief and the vice president of public safety there would probably agree with that. I want to speak for them. But I don't want Iowa City officers shooting radar out in North Liberty. We're just not going to do that. They're paid by our taxpayers. They're going to police this area, and that's what they should be doing.
With the city police and the university police,
yes,
quite often the city will ask the university to come in and help, especially because all the students come from their dorms into the city.
Well, I'll tell you,
so
if we talk
so
about,
there always is this mingling together.
Yes, and that's not a bad thing, and I'll tell you why. You might find that the students trust the university police, but not the Iowa City police, because they see it more often. So if we're working together, a student that we stop may be more comfortable going, you're Iowa City, but you're okay. I'm a little more comfortable because I know you. It's like James Comey, the FBI says, it's hard to hate up close. And sometimes it's an eye roller. Yeah. It's hard to hate up close. And so if these kids are familiar with the University of Iowa police, it's a little more comforting. If they're working together on an issue or a project,
they may not be working together.
Yeah.
They're just more people, more police on a Thursday night, or Friday night, or a Saturday night in Iowa City. All the students come out,
But that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. That's a project. That's where you say, let's have the University of Iowa chief
that's what they do, and that's why university, let's say, police may have something to do with a student in Iowa City.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
and your scenario's spot on. So that's a little different than what you were talking about because we're working in conjunction with each other. So it's a little different.
But you don't know. I mean, maybe when that was happening, they were working.
Yeah,
We
well,
don't
they could have
know.
been.
We don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know what the rest of the
I mean,
facts.
you
It's a
know,
good question.
Jody, I'm Roy Sam Porter.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, sir. I'm a community activist in the community, in the African American community. I do a lot in the community. You will see me a lot if you're chosen as our chief of police.
Okay.
You will hear from me. I will call you. I will personally call you because people call
After
me.
the third call, you got to buy me coffee.
Oh, I'll buy you a coffee. After the third call, you might need more than coffee. Because people call on me, so I need to have somebody to talk to. But,
That's good.
Doing a lot in the black community. And one of the things is building trust in the black community, because right now we don't have it, sir, in this city.
Couldn't agree more.
Building trust, that's number one. I'm on all kinds of boards, even the round table that meets once a month. And every month, it's all about, to me, as far as who the chief of police is, it's all about building community, relationships.
If I get the job, invite me to a meeting and let me come and let's talk.
Okay.
More than happy to do that.
That kind of feeds into what we're talking community relations, and you said give them a call. That could be part of it. It's a small room. Reaching out, finding out these groups, who these groups are in the community, not waiting for them to call you, but maybe reaching out to them and meeting with them to build that bond.
I'll tell you how important that is. First rule of order is to meet my officers and make sure I know each and every one of them and get the mission of the police department and the expectations and what do we need to make things work, and then come outside the community. And the most important part of that community are the people that are stepping out, wanting solutions, wanting to be part of the solutions. I'm telling you right now, that's the problem solving. We can't do this by ourselves. We've got to have you guys as partners. And so those leaders like yourself that aren't afraid to step out, and like you guys that are here tonight that say I want to be part of the solution, it's huge. If we can work together and trust each other and build that trust and build that bank account full of trust, if something goes south, at least you can say, I know Matherly and he's done things right. Let's buy him a little time and find out what happened. If we made a mistake, we correct it. If we're right, you support us. And that relationship, that's what's broken down nationwide. I can tell you Ferguson didn't have enough trust in their bank account. That was a perfect storm. We don't want that to happen. So.